Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, beautiful people. It is Thursday, April 7th, 2022. Welcome to another episode of Life with Shenita. I am Shenita Connolly, and we're having a slight bit of technical difficulties for my guest this evening. So I am going to get us started and kind of set the tone for the broadcast tonight, which is literally on mental health. And so we have had this conversation a number of times on this show. And so I want to, first of all, just thank everyone for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. If you would like and share the broadcast, it would be most appreciative. Tonight's topic, again, is mental health. And so let's just briefly kind of talk about mental health. And as always, I always do a little research. And so most people believe that mental health conditions are rare and happen to someone else. In fact, mental health conditions are common and widespread. An estimated 44 million Americans suffer from some form of mental disorder in a given year. Most families are not prepared to cope with learning their loved ones has a mental illness. It can be physically and emotionally trying and can make us feel vulnerable to the opinions and judgments of others. If you think you or someone you know may have a mental or emotional problem, it is important to remember there is hope and there is help. So, what is mental illness? Mental illnesses are brain based conditions that affect our thinking, our emotions, and our behavior. Since we all have brains, mm, having some kind of mental health problem during your life or my life is rarely and really common. Not rarely, but really common. For people who have mental illnesses, their brains have changed in a way which they are unable to think, feel, or act the way they want to. For some, this means experiencing extreme and unexpected changes in their mood, like feeling more sad or worried than normal. For others, it means not being able to think clearly, not being able to communicate with someone who is talking to them, or having bizarre thoughts to help explain weird feelings they are having. There are more than 200 classified forms of mental illness. Some of the more common disorders are depression, bipolar, dementia, schizophrenia, anxiety disorders. Symptoms may include changes in mood, personality, personal habits, and or social withdrawal. Mental health problems may be related to excessive stress due to a particular situation or series of events. As with cancer, diabetes, and heart disease, mental illnesses are often physical as well as emotional and psychological. Mental illnesses may be caused by a reaction to environmental stresses, genetic factors, biochemical imbalances, or a combination of those. With proper care and treatment, many individuals learn to cope and recover from mental illness or emotional disorders. So, my guest this evening has a journey that she's been on to help others deal with such challenges as mental illnesses. She suffered with PTSD. And I'll bring her in and allow her to share her journey with you. But in the meantime, if you all would please like and share today's broadcast, because this is a major issue across the world, across the globe. And we need to have more conversations about it so that we can get some real solutions in place for those that we love and those that we know are struggling in this particular area. So, again, thank you for tuning in. Please like and share the broadcast. And I am going to bring in my guest, Miss Donna Michaels, who is also known as author D.A. Michaels. So without further delay, I'm bringing Miss Michaels in. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm so glad that you're able to be here and you're willing to share your journey, and I'm grateful. So, without delay, I'd like for you. I know I shared your bio. I'd like for you to just kind of casually introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay, thank you. Well, D.A. Michaels is my author name, but all my friends call me Donna. I like to give everybody a little warning ahead of time not to Google Donna Michaels because there is another author with the exact same name, and she writes hot, steamy romance novels about her, steamy affairs with, commandos and cowboys. And I want to let everybody right up front, that is not me, which is why I prefer to go by my initials, which is D.A. But please call me Donna. A little bit about me. I born and raised in Florida, joined the Navy right out of high school, served for 4 years. And after, it was in the 90s when they did a lot of defense budget cutbacks, that I, kind of like everybody, floundered through my 20s trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Right.
And then I became a law enforcement officer. And it was there that I kind of never in a million years did I think I would go into law enforcement. It was so not even on my radar, But what I missed about the Navy was kind of being part of a team and part of the greater good. And I enjoyed feeling like I did something that helped others. And in the military, we fought the drug wars back then. And I felt like stopping the drugs from coming into our country, was for the greater good. And I missed that part of it. So that's what drew me to law enforcement. And then long story short, after, 17 years on the job, and witnessing countless, traumatic events, responding to 911 calls, car crashes, crimes against children. I mean, some murders, some really horrific things. As first responders, firefighters and police alike, that's just our job. We're expected to go to it. What a lot of people don't realize, though, is as soon as we finish that call, we go right on to the next call, which could quite literally be a mom upset because her 10-year-old boy won't get out of bed and go to school. We get people that call 911 for all kinds of crazy reasons, from really serious to really, you got to be kidding me, right? Like you're calling because there's no chicken nuggets at the McDonald's, really? So it gets really crazy. But one thing's for sure, nobody calls 911 because they want to give you a bundt cake. Nobody right. calls you to their birthday parties or anniversary parties. Right. It's usually something that for them is the worst day of their life. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's tough sometimes because what we do is we go to the really bad calls and it's our job and we have to be able to just, okay, let's put that aside and let's move on to the next call and the next call. We work 12-hour shifts, but as police officers, firefighters work 24-hour shifts, sometimes 48 if they pull a double. And that's a lot of trauma to see, and I read a study recently that says that the average person will experience one traumatic event in their lifetime or in 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. No, sorry, in a lifetime. The average first firefighters and police will experience 8,000 in a 20-year career. Wow. Yeah. 8,000 traumatic events in a 20-year career, legitimate traumatic events. Right. So we put those in our box and we just keep putting them in our box. And we don't talk about them. We go on to the next call. We tend not to go home and talk to our loved ones about them because we don't want to burden them with the things that we've witnessed and seen. We become very hypervigilant because unfortunately we see the worst in humanity, right? And it definitely affects you. Yeah. So for me, I did that for 17 years on the job. And on June 1st of 2017, I responded to a call that for me was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was my one too many. And it was no different than other calls I had experienced in my career, but it was something about the cup overfloweth. It was just one too many. And I describe it to people like, it's like somebody took dynamite or C4 and put it on my little black box of traumas that I did a good job of keeping, locked shut,
Mm-hmm.
and it blew it up. And after that trauma, in a matter of weeks, I was hearing every mother's scream of every child death call I'd ever responded to. I could see the faces of the car crashes victims, of the murder victims, of sexual, horrible sexual violent, the bad ones, right? I couldn't get them out of my head. I could hear it. I was dreaming about it. It just wouldn't go away. And it really, it took me to my knees, and I went to a really, really, really dark place. Now, prior to that, raised Christian, never believed in suicide. Not in a million years had it ever crossed my mind. I thought it was something for cowards. The cowardly way out. I couldn't comprehend how anything could ever be so bad somebody would do something like that. And then there I was.
Contemplating it?
I'm sorry?
Contemplating it?
Oh, more than contemplating it. I was planning it. I was planning it. I was in so much, I never realized that depression could cause physical pain. I did not know that. And I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. Every part of me hurt. All I wanted to do was sleep. But then when I would sleep, I would have nightmares. So I was taking things to sleep so I wouldn't remember the nightmares. And it's a vicious cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I did reach out for help about 4 weeks after the incident, and explained to the mental health person at the agency that I worked for that, I don't understand what's wrong. This has never happened to me before. What do I do? And she said, go to the closest urgent care and tell the doctor what's going on, and they'll give you something. So I did. I was desperate. They put me on Xanax. So the Xanax helped me sleep. And if I did dream, I didn't remember it, but it didn't help the depression. It didn't help the negative thoughts. They got so bad that I thought I'm failing. We call them the demons, the demons, the negative self feelings, right? I won't say I heard voices. The only voice I heard was my own, right? Mm-hmm. But it was just negative. And it was, you're a failure as a mother. Your daughter deserves better than this. Anybody could do a better job raising her. You can't even get out of bed. If they find out at work, you're going to lose your career. And it was just really scary. So I got to a point where I just really, I couldn't find any other way out. So I started planning it, and I put my daughter on an airplane, and I sent her out of state to stay with a dear friend of mine. And I told myself, I sent her there it was supposed to be a 2-week round trip. And I told myself, either I'm going to figure this out and get help, or I'm going to end it, but I can't take it anymore. Long story short, I made a phone call to someone that I trusted very much. We served together in the military, and as soon as he answered the phone, and I burst into tears, and he already knew I was in a bad place, but that was the moment he realized how bad it really was. And, he spent 8 hours on the phone convincing me that there were other options, and I didn't have to go to my employer to get help, because my agency was what they call self-insured. So anything we did, technically they have access to see what we're doing because they're paying the medical bills, right? Mm-hmm. So none of us trusted it. And I ended up paying out of pocket, which a lot of first responders do. I ended up paying out of my own pocket and not using my insurance initially to get help. And then a couple months later, I ran into I met a combat veteran who read me like a book, knew right away I was having troubles, and he suggested I go to the VA. And I didn't think they would help me because I had never been documented with them. But when I went to them and explained to them what was going on, they took me in as a hardship case while I went through the system and the processing. And I know some people have not had luck with the VA. I have been to bad VAs, but I can tell you this particular one was wonderful. So you get good ones and you get bad ones. Mm-hmm. This one was wonderful, thank God. And they took good care of me. And it was 2 years of aggressive therapy and medication to stabilize me and get me to where I learned what was wrong, which of course ended up being diagnosed with PTSD. I learned what my triggers were, which honestly for me was probably one of the biggest helps, because I would have rages and I didn't know why. One of them was from cigarette smoke, and I would just completely get so angry when I would smell cigarette smoke. And my mom was a smoker, so that caused some, problems between us, because I would be just really mean. And then when I learned why I had it triggered to cigarette smoke, it was like, oh, well, once you understand it, it's a whole lot easier to manage.
Mm-hmm.
So if I saw somebody smoking a cigarette, I'll kind of go out of my way to, stand upwind so I don't smell it. Or, I'm very honest with people and say, hey, if you don't mind, I don't mean to be rude, but I really cannot stand the cigarette smoke. And I'm at the point now where I'm just very honest with people.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning, it was just me trying to understand myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, and then that's pretty well. And then what happened while I was in therapy is I was journaling, because I had a lot of suppressed memories I couldn't remember, some of which I wanted to remember, right? Because I couldn't remember good or bad. And I'm like, I understand why I suppressed negative, but why did I suppress positive? And they said sometimes the brain has a funny way of, when we stifle things, it'll drag some good stuff with it. So for me, there was good things I wanted to remember. So in journaling, I started sharing it with that same best friend I was talking about. And he was like, a lot of people were like, I knew your life was crazy. I knew you'd been through a lot, because I came from a troubled childhood, and which is why I joined the military, to escape. And they said, but your life has really been crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And I would always kind of laugh about it, because I just accepted it like for what it was. So they're like, you should turn your journal into a book. And I'm like, no, that's crazy. I'm not going to, my skeletons need to stay right where they are. They're just fine where they are. They're under control. They're managed. They need to stay in the closet, And then somebody I knew committed suicide. And I was the last person he talked to before he committed suicide. And it really hurt, because I am supposed to be an expert. I was trained to recognize the signs. I was trained to Baker Act people in Florida. That means take them to the mental hospital, right? And I'm going, how did I miss it? What did I miss? He was fine when I talked to him. I don't understand. Well, later I found out that after I talked to him, something happened that triggered him, that made him take his own life. And I had to really kind of sit on that. And I thought, you know what, if sharing my story stops one person from killing themselves and gives them the hope they need to understand that it can get better if they get the help they need, then it's worth putting myself out there. And that's when my book, Courageously Broken, was born, basically.
Courageously Broken.
Courageously Broken. That's the title of my book. Yeah. And a lot of people I don't understand that, some people have but you're not broken. And I'm like, no. And I really never was from the outside, because I used to always hear, oh, you're so strong. You've been through so much. And inside my head, I'm like, oh, if you only knew how screwed up I really was, but we put on a good front, right? We put on a good show.
Yes, we do.
And I said, yeah. And I said, I might have looked strong and I might have looked resilient, but I promise you, inside, I was broken. I felt very broken. And the courage is what it takes to get the help you need. Because a lot of people, they don't want to go see a therapist because they don't want to talk about the things that they've been through.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you have to. You can't keep bottling it up. One day it's going to blow up and it's going to suck.
Yes.
Pardon my French.
No, that's being real.
Yeah,
and that's what we need to.
Really gonna hurt.
Yeah, we need to be real about this issue. This issue is very important. It's happening more than we care to admit. And the more, like you said, you share your story of survival, it will help someone else who is on the verge. So I appreciate you being here tonight and sharing that snippet of your life. I want to just do a quick icebreaker with you as we continue our conversation. And so if you had to describe the color burgundy to someone who
was blind.
Trying to see what happened here. Yes, someone who is blind. Can you hear me? I'm not sure what happened here. Okay, so
I got you.
Okay, so yes, describe the color burgundy to a blind person.
I would have to say, for me, it would be like dark chocolate with a red wine. I think,
You would
because
blend
it's
those
rich.
two.
It's rich. It's, Burgundy is a very rich,
Mm-hmm.
classy color,
Mm-hmm.
I think. And so for me, I would have to say, the richness from the dark chocolate,
Mm-hmm.
but the red wine is where the red comes in,
I
right?
like. Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that. So
I
they,
don't know. It just makes sense to me.
yeah, it does make sense, and they would feel that color
You
burgundy.
could taste it,
You could
right?
taste it, right? Because you got the dark chocolate, the sweetness, and then the red wine, and you blend those two together to get that color
Yep.
burgundy. I like it. I like it. So, so let me ask you this. You kind of shared a little bit about mental health. And why do you think it's important as it relates to optimal health? Why is it so important for us to have the conversations with the therapist? Because I am pro therapy. When my first marriage ended in 1989, I was in my first session in 1990. And so I've been introduced to therapy and not afraid of it for a long time. Um, and so I understand it. But for someone who may be watching out there, why is it important for optimal health that we take care of our mental health?
Well, oh my gosh. I mean, we could talk forever just on that. But I think, like I said a minute ago, when I was in the darkness and I got caught up in my own negative thoughts, there's some cliches out there, you can't see the forest for the trees, or when you're in the storm, you can't find your way out, right? Well, the
Mhm.
therapist is that person that can guide you out of the forest, that can, that has that bird's eye view above the storm, that can guide you through the storm. But when you're by yourself in your own thoughts, those negative voices will take over, right?
Mhm.
And not only is therapy important because a lot of times, even like me, I'll have to think about something forever, but then it's not until I say it out loud that all of a sudden I'll have an epiphany because I just heard myself talk about something out loud. A lot of times you can actually draw your own conclusions just by talking.
Mhm.
And I tell some guys, I'm like, look, if you don't want to go see a therapist, that's fine, but talk to somebody. And more importantly, talk to somebody who gets it. Talk to somebody who's been there
That's right.
because they've already been through the storm, so they can help you, right?
Mhm. Yes.
But it's very important to talk. And I listened to a World War II veteran get up once at a PTSD conference, and he point blank said to a crowd of people my generation, and said, my generation, speaking of his generation, my generation doesn't understand PTSD. We didn't suffer from PTSD. So to be honest with you, I don't get it. Now that was kind of a initially on the surface kind of a blow.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
then what he said next was powerful. He said, "But I 100% believe that it's real because I've seen it too many times." And then he went on to talk about how much has changed from war fighting the way it's done today versus how it was done back in the old days.
Mhm.
And here's what's interesting. Back in the old days, when the war was over or when men,
Mhm.
would come back, they didn't get on a plane and fly here and be in the States in a few hours. They had to take ships and it took days to cross the ocean, right? And they
Mhm.
did it in groups of all men. And during those long trips across the ocean, they would talk to each other about the things they had done and what they had been through. They didn't know it. They were doing group therapy back then,
Mhm.
right? When
Mhm.
you really think about it,
That's
they were
really powerful.
talking. So when they got off the ships, when the ships made it back to the US and they went back to their families, that was their brothers, right?
Mhm.
That's where it
Mhm.
was. Nowadays, all that has changed. If
Yes.
somebody gets hurt or deployment, they're on a plane and they're back over here in a matter of a day. They
Yes.
don't get that chance to talk with their brothers.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's really hard on them to just be thrown back into our society that we're used to here every day with their families and be expected to act normal.
Yes.
It's it's asking a lot of them to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that, right?
Absolutely.
So with that said, talking is critically important, and those men of World War II, my grandpa was one of them.
Mhm.
My grandpa came from nothing, nothing. dirt poor during the Depression, farm way up in northern Michigan. His best friend in the Army came from a very affluent family.
Mm-hmm.
Those men couldn't have come from different backgrounds, more different backgrounds if they tried. They were friends till the wealthier gentleman died first. And 20 years later, my grandpa died.
Mm-hmm.
My grandpa never stopped talking about him. That was his best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they fought together. And when they needed each other, when the nightmares would come, when they would get down about somebody they might have lost, they talked to each other.
Yeah.
Communication is powerful. The
Yeah.
other reason it's important is people don't realize that when a person doesn't get mental health help, not only are they hurting their mind and their relationships and their hearts and their emotions, but the stress that they're putting their body through, they've now discovered a unique protein that we carry when we're under a lot of stress, and it's causing a unique type of heart disease that can't be found in lab work, can't be found with a heart cath, but it's a unique protein. And that's why we have the heart and lung bills for firefighters and police, because we have a lot of them that are in great shape and they just one day drop dead of a massive heart attack that nobody even knew was coming.
Mm-hmm.
Stress is really, really hard on us, both mentally and physically.
Yes, it is.
So.
And you said something that's so powerful that I oftentimes share with those close around me. Talk. Open your mouth and talk. Find someone that you can talk to, that you can trust. I use Facebook as a way to journal. And sometimes I journal out loud. And it's an effort to help others be bold to do the same. Now, they don't have to do like me, but they can find their own way to journal. So it's a way to really encourage people. Talk it out. Don't keep it bottled up inside. I've never been that girl. And there are things that I have to say to people, and sometimes they're uncomfortable, but I've learned to say them because I need it for me, not you.
Yeah. And it's important to find the right person to talk to. And the reason is, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, is well, first, let me just say this, because I always like to tell everyone this. We are losing more first responders to suicide than we are in the line of duty. And nobody wants to talk about it. It's not considered in the line of duty deaths, like heart attack is, but suicide isn't. But stress does the same thing.
Right.
I know, right? It bothers me too. And I hope to see that change one day.
Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, our leaderships are kind of failing us because they just don't, it's money. At the end of the day, it's money, right? So, but on top of it, veterans go through this as well. We'll find a therapist who's never served, who doesn't understand what it's like to be a first responder and see or hear the things that we see and hear. And I've heard countless tell me that their therapist quit them, meaning they couldn't handle what they were telling them because they felt like it was negatively affecting them as a therapist. And they would say, I'm so sorry, I can't help you. You need to find someone else. Because the therapist couldn't handle the things they were telling them. Because like I said, we see the worst in people, right? Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So it's very important. But I know of a handful of first responders that have either quit the profession and gone into counseling, or have retired and gone into counseling. Mm-hmm. Because we need a lot more therapists who understand us.
And can relate.
It's so important. So if anybody out there finds a therapist that isn't helping them because they don't get it, it's not the end of the world. There's others out there that are. You just haven't found the right one, and you got to keep looking. You can't just quit.
And and I'm going to say this, I became a life coach after my husband passed away. And I became a life coach, and my target audience are widows and widowers because I can help them, because I can relate to them. And I'm a parent educator. And so I can teach and educate in that area because I'm a parent. I'm speaking from experience as well as education. And so that is so important when you can relate to people, not just education, but you cannot even understand what they're going through. So I can
100%.
I applaud whomever those individuals are who decided to retire or end one career and go into that career, because it's much needed. It
really is.
Yeah.
Very needed.
So I know that, you mentioned earlier that you became an author as a result of trying to help someone because you lost your friend. So tell us about the journey to becoming an author. What was that like? Did you, because I haven't read your book, so I don't know that you wrote about incidents that you went through. What was that like for you to write your book about on this topic? What was that like?
Well, bear in mind, I kind of tell people it was a book by accident, right? It was my diary. And all I really did was go back through it, and I changed everyone's names for privacy reasons, obviously. There are some very personal things in there, and I know I do have a daughter, and so some things I had to kind of go through and go, might want to water this down a little bit, but not too much. I can only think of one thing that I might have watered down, and that was for my daughter's sake, and that's out of respect for her, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, what most readers have said is my book is a roller coaster, much like life is. People will people have said, "Oh my God, 1 minute I was laughing, hysterically, and then the next page I'm crying," and I'm like, "That's life." We have peaks and valleys. Mm-hmm. As far as the book is concerned, like I said, it was a book by accident, and when I got talked into converting it into a book, I reached out to the gentleman who wrote my foreword. His name is Mann, and he's a New York Times bestselling author. And we served together in Panama back in the early 90s during the drug wars. Mm-hmm. He retired from SEAL Team 6, and he wrote, his bestseller is Inside SEAL Team 6, but he's got several other books as well. Great books, a lot of leadership advice, things of that nature. And I called Don, and this was right at the beginning of COVID. And I called him and I said, I think I wrote a book. How do I go from Google Docs to an actual book now? And he gave me a list of publishers he thought that would be right. And I submitted to several of them, which was extraordinarily difficult and tedious. It is very hard to do. I can explain why if you want me to, but I will tell you that it was not an easy process. Mm-hmm. And after about a month, every day, and by the way, I got hurt in the line of duty right at the beginning of COVID. So I was out of work at home with nothing to do, waiting for shoulder surgery. So I had to find something to do with myself. And so while I was putting all these packages together to each individual, publishing company and agent and whatever, and I wasn't getting anything back. And they say that you will hear normally you will hear back within 2 weeks, either yes or no. Mm-hmm. Right. I wasn't getting anything, no response at all. So I called Don and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, do I continue to move forward with this agent? Because they have rules that you can only apply to one agent within a publishing company at a time. And each company could have 20 or 30 agents. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, what do I do now? I'm in limbo. Mm-hmm. So he's like, it's weird. He goes, I've submitted 2 manuscripts and I can't get a hold of my publishers either. And he's been published over 20 times. So we concluded that it must have been COVID. All the agencies were shut down and we were sitting in somebody's inbox for God knows how long. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's when somebody else was like, why don't you indie publish? And I'm like, what's that? So mm-hmm. that basically means self-publish, right? Mm-hmm. So I did, and it's kind of the trend. And what's basically happening is if you're a celebrity or a politician or someone that, everybody knows who you are, publisher companies are pretty easy to deal with. If you aren't famous and you're a nobody, as they say, publishing company, you're pretty much going to have to indie publish. And then what the publishing companies do is they wait and they see how your book does on its own, right? Mm-hmm. And then if they think it's financially worth it to them, then they'll come and, take over. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I did all the hard work. I might as well just keep going, right? Because I let somebody else benefit off my hard work. So I continued. I just kept mine as an indie, and I'm glad I did. So, yes. So I went and I learned all about it. Serial numbers, ISBN numbers. I found my daughter actually designed my cover. I don't know if you've seen my book, but
I have a copy of it here. I love the cover.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
My daughter actually designed the cover and I sent it to a graphics artist. He did the cover for it with the dimensions because it takes special software.
Yes.
I formatted it on the publishing company's, the indie publishing, self-publishing company's website. I formatted it. I did everything myself. I did have an editor because you should always, always get a second pair of eyes to look at your work. No matter how good your grammar is, no matter how good your spelling is, whatever, always get another pair of eyes for two reasons. Authors, we could change our book. No matter how many times I look at my book, I can always find something I wish I would have worded differently. Like you'll never finish editing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number two, by letting somebody else do it, especially somebody that didn't have a first responder or military background, she was able to pick up things, slang that I just took for granted. And she goes, "What does this mean?" And I'm like, "Oh, you're right. You know, the average person wouldn't know what that means, and I have to explain it." So it was good to have a fresh pair of eyes with no mutual lingo, you know, that said, "Hey, you need to explain this in layman terms," you know. So so it was really good. It was a good experience. It kept me very, you know, gave me something to do during COVID. It came out Veterans Day of 2020.
Okay.
And it's been a great ride ever since.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I'm a self-published author times two myself, so I understand exactly where you are coming from. So congratulations to you on your first book. I'm sure that
yes,
there will
I
be
do plan to do another one. It's just time.
Yes. So, you know, as you think about, you know, mental illness, what do you consider to be some of the leading causes of the mental health issues today, if you had to take a guess?
Well, it really depends on what mental illness we're talking about. I think there is a difference. I mean, if you were to say PTSD, obviously that's trauma. And I tell people this all the time, like literally anyone can get PTSD.
When my husband died, he had a heart attack in front of me, I went through PTSD. Okay.
I believe it.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a military person. So yes, so I understand how trauma can play a role in your mental state. Depression sets up and you don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to live. I get it. I've been there. So
you keep reliving it in your mind. You keep replaying it. Yeah. What if this? What if that? Yeah, I get it. And a lot of people, you know, when I first heard I had PTSD, I was like, no, I don't. That's for combat veterans. That's for people who've been to war. I mean, that's what I thought.
That's what we were taught. I mean, we were told that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
No. And it occurred to me, it can be domestic violence victims get it. Child sex victims obviously get it. The clerk at the bank that got robbed at gunpoint could get it. People who've witnessed traumatic car crashes, you know, where people have been ejected, I found a woman once who had been sitting in her car for an hour, frozen at the steering wheel because of a car crash. It was actually a motorcycle crash that happened right in front of her. And she was so traumatized, we couldn't even get her out of the car. She was there for an hour, just frozen. You know, so literally anyone can get PTSD, but we associate veterans and first responders more because we see more trauma. We're more susceptible to it, right? With that said, PTSD, when it comes to mental illness, I kind of put it in its own category because anybody could get it, right? From a traumatic experience. Now, when you get into your bipolars, your schizophrenias, your depression, your anxiety disorders, those type of things, I think that part of it is obviously genetic. You know, it can run in the family. I personally, based on my observations, I'm not a licensed mental health expert, but just my personal opinion is that I think anxiety sometimes can be a learned behavior. If a child has a parent, maybe with PTSD, maybe with anxiety themselves, or, you know, in a domestic violence situation, but was never, you know, was just the child of, and that was it, but witnessed it, that could cause anxiety, right? And it can happen that way. Yeah. And I've been talking to a lot of the resources that I support for veterans, first responders with PTSD about doing retreats for parents and children. Because as a single mom with a daughter, I know my PTSD has affected my daughter, and I feel horrible about it. But when you're in the storm, you don't realize how your behavior affects others, right? So we're going to a retreat this summer. I'm super excited about it. And we're actually going to another one in Costa Rica where it's for mothers' daughters or parents of children. And I think it's great because now our kids are going to be able to understand why mommy or daddy is this way and what they can do to help. And most importantly, don't blame themselves, right? Because it's not their fault.
It's not their fault.
So yeah,
that
exactly.
Awesome.
So yeah, so I'm happy to see more and more nonprofit organizations that are helping with this is starting to include couples retreats, children, family retreats, things of that nature. Now, my opinion again, based on my experience and what I've witnessed, schizophrenia and bipolar, and I'm sure I'm leaving out others like, multiple personality disorder. They think this probably from like a traumatic childhood, where it's a way to cope kind of a thing. But I think drug use has played a huge part in the number of mental illnesses we see today versus a couple generations ago, right? Because especially drug use in young years when the brain is still developing, people don't realize the human brain isn't done until you're 25 years old.
Yes. Oh, I had that conversation with someone today. Yep. Yes. Most people don't understand that.
Right. So now imagine a brain that's not done developing, and we're going to introduce, psychedelic drugs, acid, marijuana. I mean, first of all, I'm pro medical marijuana. I want to bash marijuana. I think it has its legitimate purposes, right? But if a person doesn't have a legitimate purpose and they're just doing it to get high, maybe to escape the problems of their real life, instead of dealing with their real problems, they're escaping of marijuana. Now they're introducing something into their brain. They're not learning coping mechanisms. They're getting high and they're altering the chemicals in their brain, right?
At a young age.
Say again?
At a young age.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean. At a young age, right? High school, middle school, right? Yeah, and that's a dangerous age to be playing with this stuff. And I'm even say that with the pharmaceuticals. I don't want to just put it on illegal drugs, but even the pharmaceuticals, like some kids will be put on, antidepressants, and you read the box and it actually can cause suicidal ideation to increase versus go away, which is what it's supposed to do. And again, it's because their brain's not done developing. They're going to react different than we do as grown adults. So I'm not against it, but I'm not all for it.
Right.
I think every person is unique and they have to find what's right for them. But the worst thing a person can do is do nothing, to just ignore it.
Right.
Right.
Thank you for saying that. The worst thing you can do is to ignore the condition.
Right.
And get help. So we want to make sure anyone that's watching this broadcast today or the replay tomorrow, if there is any concern with yourself or those that you love, that you will seek the help you need. Mental health it's okay to not be okay. Like it's okay to get the help that you need so that you can live a better quality of life. When I think of mental health, like you said, talking to people, finding that safe place or safe space that you can feel comfortable letting someone know your deepest thoughts is important as we try to handle this mental health problem that exists today, because I've never seen so many cases or so many people that I personally know struggling and suffering. And can we say COVID has something to do with it? Yes, we can. But even prior to COVID, there were lots of people that I knew that were struggling, and people just don't like to talk. They don't like to share.
They're afraid of what people are going to think. They're afraid of being judged. In my line of work, they're afraid of losing their jobs.
Yeah.
And that's not okay. So that's a leadership issue, right?
Yes.
You should not be afraid of losing your career because you're going through a difficult time, whether it's a grief thing where you've lost someone you love, whether it's, you've experienced a traumatic event, whatever it is, right? Leadership needs to understand that, back in the old days when and I'm not condoning alcohol use.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the old days, people would go to the bar, first responders especially, would go to the bar with their brothers that they work with, and they would have a few drinks. And again, that was a form of group therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
As
Mm-hmm.
long as you don't drink in excess and get a drunk, DUI or become a
Right.
violent drunk, because people just shouldn't drink, period, right?
Right. Exactly.
Everybody's different, but in moderation and being responsible about it, there's nothing wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're the mean drunk type, or that you make bad choices when you're under the influence, then maybe you shouldn't drink.
That's right.
But find an outlet, and not alone. Like, some people will go to the gym and work incessantly, and that's great. That definitely helps stress. It's
Mm-hmm.
definitely good for you.
Mm-hmm.
But while you're doing it, you still got to do something about those thoughts in your head,
That's
right? And that's where talking is important. So go work out with a buddy and talk while you're working out, or go hiking, go walking, go
Mm-hmm.
do something,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But talk.
Yeah.
It's so important.
So
And be there for each other. And if somebody, one of your buddies or brothers or sisters, comes to you and is like, hey, I got this going on, just be a good friend and listen.
That's
Do
right.
for someone else what you would want done for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you are judging, don't show it.
One of the things I've learned over the years is that the same situation you may judge someone about could come knocking at your door.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And so we have to remember, it might not be you today, but it could be you the next moment. So don't judge people. As you said, stop judging them. I had to learn that lesson. So I'm hoping whomever is watching, if they haven't learned that lesson, that they will learn that lesson, because it could be them today and you in the next moment. And so,
but for the grace of God to lie, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And I was one of those people. I had to learn that lesson the hard way. And I can't even describe the level of guilt I felt for having thought the way I used to think.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Thank goodness for change, right?
Amen.
So if you had to share with someone, Mother's Day is coming up next month, Easter is coming up. If you had to share with someone some thoughts or some things that you would like for them to keep in mind to get through those holidays, because they may have, lost someone and it's tough for them, what would you say? Yes, we talked about talking, finding a therapist. What are some other things would you recommend to someone as a way of coping during those times or seasons?
Well, it's funny you should ask me that, because I am 1 week away from the 1-year anniversary of losing my mom.
My condolences.
And we were really, really close. My whole family was my mom, myself, and my daughter. So it was hard. It was really hard. I mean, and it was hard from a selfish perspective, because, she was my mom, of course, and my daughter's grandma. But there was part of me then and now that knows she's in a better place. She's at peace, and she's no longer in pain, which she suffered in chronic pain for many, many years. So for that part of it, I'm happy for her, because I know she's right where she wanted to be. So to answer your question, from the time my mom passed away, getting through her funeral, throughout this year, especially over the holidays, because it was the first Christmas without her, right? And now coming up on her anniversary and Mother's Day, the way I've done it, and my daughter agrees, we look at it from the perspective of, what would she want us to do? Would she want us to sit around and be sad? Or would she want us to go do something in her memory? And for Christmas, we both agreed we didn't want to be here for Christmas. So we drove all the way to Montana from Florida to have our first white Christmas.
Awesome.
And yeah. And we took my mom with us the whole way. I mean, these are her ashes. She goes with us everywhere we go. My daughter has a cross. I have the little American flag heart, and her ashes are in here with us. And She loved to travel. She was very
Mhm.
adventurous. So for us, it's we will go do something that she would have loved to do.
I love
And
it.
it's almost like we picked up on her bucket list and we're trying to finish it for her, and we're taking her on our journey with us, and so that's how we do it, and it works. I
Yes.
mean, it doesn't make it completely better, but it makes it a lot less painful.
Yes. And you're right. I love the idea of the celebration of her life in memory of her. We've done that for my husband each year. It'll be 7 years this year. And my parents, my brother who passed away last March, we always do something in their memory in a
Exactly.
celebratory way. Like,
Right.
we
Right.
miss
What would
you.
they want?
Yeah, we miss you, but we're going to celebrate the life that you lived, the legacy that you left, and it helps us get through. And that's why I share so many memories, because I want to make sure that, yeah, although life is difficult and challenging, but there are some wonderful moments that we all can relish in about our loved ones to keep us going or to make us smile, particularly during these holiday times, or these first, as I call the first, are sometimes the most difficult ones.
Hmm.
And we can get through those moments. And that's why I'm real passionate about my widows and widowers that I work with and have been working with since 2016, is because I can relate to them, of course, and they're safe with me. So anytime they're in my space, they know they're safe. Like, I will take care of their heart.
Hmm.
And so people
And
want
I'm
to
sure it
know.
helps when you understand.
Yes, I can relate. And so you're safe with me. And I'm like you. You said earlier that you didn't want to put your mess in a book. I didn't want to put my mess in a book, but God said, you better tell that story, because it's not about you, Shenita. You've already gone through it. It's about other people out there who have not gone through what you've gone through, that you need to help. And so that keeps me going on this journey. And I'm sure it keeps you going on your journey of this mental health challenge to help others. Yeah.
Hmm. Oh yeah, no, it's definitely taken me. I tell everybody, for every door that opens, there's three more behind it waiting, and it's
Mhm.
definitely taking me in a direction that I never imagined in a million years. Like public speaking. Like, never saw myself as a public speaker.
Yes.
Right now, I get invited to go to conferences,
Yeah.
and I've just launched. If you don't mind me mentioning
Yeah.
this,
Please.
got a website that
Mhm.
I've got a website that's currently under construction. It's not ready yet. Um, there is a page on my current website, which is courageouslybroken.com, and it's called HU2H, the HU and the number 2H, and it stands for Heroes United to Heal. And where it's going to get its own website real soon. It's under
Mhm.
construction.
Mhm.
And what it is it's going to be a menu of nothing but resources for those struggling, where they can go and they can find what's right from them. Everything from a service dog to equine therapy to outdoor retreats to actual intake facilities, whatever it is they need,
Love it.
right? And it's all ran by nonprofits, and they're all vetted, and they're all very, legit.
Yes.
Um, and it's a way they can do it from from the privacy of their own home, without going through their agencies, and or insurance or whatever. There's so many. If I had known that half of what was out there when I was going through my troubles, I would have reached out, but I had no idea how much there was, and a lot of people don't. So I want to build, like, we're building a website that's, it's free, and all the
Mhm.
person's got to do is know where to go, and they can read through the menus and reach out to these different nonprofits and fill out the applications, and when they go, they meet others just like them, and then they leave like a family, and then they have somebody they can pick up the phone and call, right?
Mhm.
So it's really good stuff. I'm excited about it. We're going to be doing some fundraising as well for it,
Good.
in the future. But my goal is to erase the stigma. We've got to get rid of the stigma.
We got it. That right there. We have to get rid of the stigma around mental health.
Yep.
I also, before we end the show, I want you to share where they can purchase your book. I want you to, share your
Okay.
information, because we didn't get a chance to create the banner because of the technical issues that we had. So I want
Okay.
you to share with them how they can purchase a copy of your book.
It's real easy. Amazon, Courageously Broken, D.A. Michaels, as the author. If they want to learn more about me and what we're doing and building, they can go to my website, which is courageouslybroken.com. And they can click on the buy now link and it'll take them straight to Amazon. So they can either look it up on Amazon themselves, or they can go to my website and find it that way. But it's pretty easy to find. It pops right up.
Courageously Broken on Amazon.
Yes.
And did you mention a website, or I know you mentioned one that's under construction?
No, courageouslybroken.com for the book is there. It's up and running.
Okay, so
once HU2H is finished being built, we're going to merge the two.
Okay, all right. So I am going to put this here, and the website.
Yep. And I have to brag on myself. I'm not good at it, but I'm going to do it. So the reviews are amazing. You know, I encourage everybody to please go read the reviews. I've been pleasantly surprised about how many men love it. It's 50-50 men and women,
Love it.
which surprised me. I got to admit, I kind of expected more women to be drawn to it, but it's been 50-50 men. I've had men come find me at, signings and say, hey, I bought this on Amazon. Will you sign it for me? And I do.
Love it.
So that's been pretty neat. And a lot of people have reached out to me privately. And I think you can't put a dollar figure on this. The biggest reward I get is when somebody actually will send me a lot of times a private message and say, I've just read your book, or I've just seen your interview. And I want to thank you because I felt so alone. I literally did not know there were other people out there with stories, like mine. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm by no means, I tell people all the time, like, by no means am I special. I mean, there's tons of people who have stories just like mine, but it's theirs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, they, and I didn't want to come out with my story either, but I did it, like I said, because I felt like it was my duty at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so rewarding when someone reaches out to me and tells me, thank you, because now I feel like I have hope. I know what to do because you did it. I can do it. Right. And that is just, you can't put anything on that. It makes me so happy.
And that's when you know that you're living a purpose life, right? When the feedback comes, when I get feedback about my book, Is Your House in Order? And people have taken the necessary steps to get their affairs in order, and they say, because of you, or they'll say, hey, would you go with me to take care of this because you inspired me to get it done? That is payback right there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So continue to brag on yourself. Congratulations to you again, because you deserve that and more, because you're pouring out what you've gone through to bless the people. And so in return, you should be proud of all of that. But I'll give you an opportunity to share some parting words as we prepare to close out.
Well, it's real simple. I promise everything in life happens for a reason. And we may not understand it at the time, and we may be angry or sad or whatever at the time. But in hindsight, we often will learn, oh, that happened, so this could happen. Mm-hmm. And I genuinely think in my case, I went through all of my crap so that I could be where I am today and help others. So, for those that are struggling, understand that eventually you're going to get to a place, as long as you don't quit, that you'll understand why you had to go through this storm so that you could get to the rainbow or the light at the other side, the other end.
At the end of the tunnel. Be patient. Don't give up. By all means, hang in there, because there are going to be times that you want to give up, and you just have to hang in there and push through. And I try to be that example for others, to see someone literally pushing through every day to get to a certain place in life. And so I want to thank Elizabeth for connecting us. And
she's awesome.
Yes. So I want to thank her for the connect. And it has been more than a pleasure to talk with you. Even though we had the challenges in the beginning, it was so worth having you to share this conversation, because it is so relevant and it is so needed. And thank you for all that you do to help others on this journey.
No, it's my honor. I'm the lucky one.
And thank you for your service to our country.
Oh, thank you. It built me into who I am, which is a lot A lot of the funny stories are in there are my old military stories, and that's kind of what built me into who I am and gave me the warped sense of humor that I have.
I'm from Pensacola, Florida, and we're a Navy town. I don't know if you ever were in
Yes,
Pensacola.
yes, the Blue Angels.
Yes, 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 yes. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, DA
Thank you.
Michaels,
Thank you for
so
having
much for your time. And so to the audience, thank you all for tuning in. I hope that this blessed you, hearing her story and her sharing. If you have a concern about your mental state, please seek help, because no one is without going through this process, as I read to you earlier. At some point in our lives, we will all deal with a mental health issue or concern, regardless to what, if it's divorce, it's death, loss of job, whatever it is, it can affect your mental health. So
you
we
are
thank
not
you.
alone.
You are not alone. Remember that. You are not alone. Thank you all for tuning in. And next Thursday, guess what? We'll be celebrating 2 years of Life with Shenita's talk show. And I am so excited to have some of my favorite guests to join me next Thursday in a celebration of 24 months. So thank you all, and you have an amazing evening. And we'll see you all next go round. Have a good night.